Welcome back to Basketball, everyone. So it was announced quite a while ago that we were going to be getting a spin-off to Spongebob SquarePants called Kamp Koral, taking place when the characters were children in a summer camp. And this was actually going to be a continuation of the third SpongeBob movie that we get in 2020 called It's a Wonderful Sponge. In there, we're going to be introduced to Kamp Koral and the characters that are aged down, and then afterwards get a TV show based on that. I'd say ever since this announcement, the general consensus is that this is a bad thing. A lot of people don't want it, considering well, the premise itself isn't even that interesting and people didn't like it, and the fact that, the creator himself didn't want this show. However, I do think there is a possibility this could end up being somewhat good. I still think it's going to fail, or especially compared to the original show, and I don't think it's going to even, come close to that level of quality, even though I guess SpongeBob's quality has dipped in recent years. But still, I wanted to talk about it and discuss what I think the show needs to do to be successful, as well as what it shouldn't do, and what it's probably going to do. But with that being said, everyone, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's start off with discussing the whole aging down thing, because this was, I'd say, the big concern for a lot of people when going into this idea, is that you're aging down the characters. Maybe a spin-off where they go to a different location and it's CGI and it's different, maybe that would work. But I'd say most people's problems stemmed from the fact that the characters are going to be aged down, that they were going to be children, and I've had a big problem with that ever since the announcement. However, I'm kind of coming around on it now, and I could barely even say that, but I was thinking about it tonight, and I was thinking about the original show. And in recent years, SpongeBob and Patrick, more so than ever, have been dumbed down. I mean, Patrick was always supposed to be dumb and SpongeBob more naive, but especially in recent years, they're just full-blown children. So I don't really think the problem is that they're going to be aged down, it's that they continue to act just like they are now. Don't get me wrong, I still really enjoy the show, and actually the recent seasons have been pretty good, but compared to the beginning of the show to now, those characters act very differently. And if you even age them down, I don't even know what you really could do to make them even more childish, even more like that, because they already kind of are. So I really don't have a concern with that anymore, at least not as much as I used to, because when SpongeBob or Patrick are the sole focus and they already act like children, making them actual children isn't going to do much to your show. Now, you could have bad writing, of course, and that would make it a bad show, the way you actually take those characters and what you do with them, but I don't think the big problem stems from aging down the characters, at least not anymore. In fact, and this is where I'm getting into how the show can succeed, you can do things like diving more in depth into, let's say, Mr. Krabs' backstory. Now, since SpongeBob and a lot of the other characters are going to be children, Mr. Krabs, I would say, would be in like his early 20s, or the equivalent of that. That's what he would look like, that's how he would act around that time, something like that, maybe even 30s. Mr. Krabs is obviously much older than all the other characters, so if he's going to be in this spin-off show, he wouldn't necessarily be like those characters. He wouldn't be a child. And we have, had tidbits and, little hints towards his history in the Navy and just his past in general. And since you are going further into the past, I do think this actually gives you an opportunity to go more in depth on that, show a lot more of Mr. Krabs' backstory, him and his buddies and the Navy, and maybe over like the course of a season actually get a proper backstory to the Krusty Krab and the Chum Bucket. We've already sort of had that in the show, or the main SpongeBob show, but it's been changed so many times, you really could do it over again. Really, when it comes to the main idea of Kamp Koral, I think a lot of the fans would appreciate more of a Mr. Krabs and sort of Plankton backstory than the actual show in general, and if they were to do something like that, it would actually get me excited for it. Although I still am kind of holding out some hope that it wouldn't be completely bad. You have the whole CGI thing going for the show, and I think SpongeBob looks really good in CGI. Actually, we're watching gameplay right now of an upcoming SpongeBob game, or a remake of an older SpongeBob game. And you could say this is in a CGI art style, and we've also seen SpongeBob in CGI and Sponge Out of Water. Even though that was sort of limited, you still got a good idea of what it would look like, and this show is going to be CGI animated. However, of course, they will not have the budget of a huge movie, and it's different than making a video game, of course. But I have to say, I am very curious to see how this is going to turn out. The animation, yes, it'll be cheaper than a CGI animated movie. It's not going to come out looking like Toy Story 4. but it's going to be something different. It's going to be a change of pace, something that we really haven't seen too much with SpongeBob, unless you count recent years, which we've seen it a couple of times, but this is going to be a full-blown show in CGI. Now, it won't necessarily just be the main SpongeBob show, but I'm still curious to see that. I think that's something that the show has going for it, is just different art style. Something that the show has going against it is the setting of Kamp Koral. I'm not really a big fan of that. I feel like when you don't know what to do with this series, a lot of people just throw them into summer camp, and I can't think of too many things in specific, but I feel like that's just a plot point that has been done over and over and over again in television. Two things off the top of my head. The show Jessie on Disney Channel ended after I think 3 seasons, and then they took a lot of the remaining characters and threw them into summer camp and created the show Bunked on Disney Channel, so there's one thing. Also, if you guys remember the Fred movies, and I guess that's not the best representation, but I guess it was owned by Nickelodeon, but the Fred movies, third time around, they probably didn't know what to do, threw them into summer camp. If you guys can think of any other series that has done that, because I feel like there's been a lot more that have done something like that, let me know in the comments below. So that's one reason why I'm not a big fan of this idea of them going to Kamp Koral. Now, I know we're going to be getting that in the 3rd SpongeBob movie, and that's going to be our introduction to it, and it's probably going to be better in that movie, but I still don't think it's a great idea. Of course, we don't know exactly what's going to be happening in the show, but I would imagine that they're going to stick to the location of Kamp Koral most of the time. We don't know how big it is or exactly what it is, but it kind of sucks because in SpongeBob, the main show, you have all these different locations, which makes the show interesting. They're constantly going to new places. I mean, not every episode, of course, but, still. And in this show, you would think that they'd stick to Kamp Koral and the scenery wouldn't change as much. That's another little thing that is a little bit of concern with me. And we're probably going to get all the tropes like the wacky camp counselor, and SpongeBob and everybody else are going to be like, I wouldn't say the rebels, but the campers that get into a lot of mischief and everything. Like, I feel like I've seen this before, and I might be getting ahead of myself because we haven't seen SpongeBob 3, and we also haven't seen anything for Kamp Koral, but the general premise of the show is that, so I don't think I'm wrong to assume we're going to be seeing stuff like that in the show. But then again, we can see some more cool origin stuff. Now, of course, SpongeBob, the main show, has its own canon, sort of, and this was a big complaint when the show was announced as well, as that it'd be messing with SpongeBob canon. And to that I say, SpongeBob never really had a canon. They had some, episodes in the 1st season which set up the rest of the show, and they kind of needed to do that at the time to introduce everybody to the show, but at this point, they've changed it so many times that it really isn't much of a concern for me. The main show itself has messed with canon and has completely changed it and altered it already, so I don't really mind Kamp Koral doing it. You could also make the argument that even if you were concerned for that, Kamp Koral itself could take place in a different universe, has a different art style, has a lot of different stuff going on, so that's not really my problem. But, you could still do cool origin stuff. Like I mentioned earlier, you've got Mr. Krabs and Plankton, their story, Mr. Krabs and the Navy, and you could also have the first time that Sandy comes to Bikini Bottom. Sandy's going to be in the show, it's pretty obvious, but this is your perfect opportunity to do more with her introduction and her coming to Bikini Bottom for the first time. I don't believe we saw that in SpongeBob. We saw her introduction, and she said that's around when she got to Bikini Bottom, but we never saw her actually go. It'd be really funny if we could actually see her life outside of the water before she decided to move to Bikini Bottom, things like that. It can be interesting. But overall, I just really don't know how to feel about the show. I don't think it's all doom and gloom, and that's 100% going to fail like a lot of other people on the internet, but I also don't think that the premise is all that great. So, I haven't given up. I'm going to cover the show as the news is rolling out, and I am still somewhat excited for it because it's more SpongeBob content, but at the same time, I am very cautious. I just wanted to make this video to talk about what I see the potential in the show, what that is, and also some stuff that's definitely going to drag it down. But please let me know in the comments what you think of the idea of Kamp Koral. Do you think it's going to fail? Do you think it's going to succeed? Do you think it's going to be good? Do you think it's going to be bad? And what do you want to see? I love reading your comments, so please tell me what you think. And yeah, I'll catch you all in the next video. Peace.